What's up, Reef Builders? Welcome to the second episode of Reef Recap. I'm your host, Salem Clemens. I'll be joined by Evie in the chat. Today we're going to recap the articles written this week on Reef Builders. If you haven't checked them out, make sure to do so. There's a lot of good stuff that was published this week. After that, I'll open up the floor to questions, and in my downtime I'm going to discuss my article on omics technology and the coral immune response. Now that I have the intro out of the way, we will wait for some people to tune in. Got the pre-recorded intro. We'll let a couple people hop on. If you're new here to Reef Recap, this is basically where I'm going to recap all of the articles of the week. You have the opportunity to ask me questions about my article or any article. And then on top of that, I'll be on the downtime, if there's not any questions, I'll talk about the coral immune response or anything else. So we'll let a couple more people hop on, and then I'll start breaking down and giving a recap of the articles that were posted this week. Make sure to always check them out. We usually have 1 to 3 articles published every single day, cover all the news, and also we talk about cool stuff too. Last week there were some pretty interesting ones. We had one about a vaccine for ick. There was one about stomatella snails. I had mine about dysbiosis. There was the very interesting hybrid zebramosa that emerged, and also the discovery of the largest deep water reef off the coast of North America. This week, we opened with the unfortunate news of the Saving Nemo Act, which I think there's a link in there to contact your representatives. They're pretty much trying to ban all import of anything, and it would end the hobby. There would still be aquaculture, but would not be very good for things. After that, we had an article. There is a new species of acropora eating nudibranch. So far, 2 that are not good news. But then there was amazing news. Fiji coral is coming back. I have received news that the first box of Fijian coral has arrived in the United States. It's at one of the largest wholesalers. A couple wholesalers got boxes. It's going to distribute to stores this week, so you might see Fiji coral for the first time since I believe 2016 or 2017. Yellow sarcophytons, there's all the really interesting types of Nephthia and things they have. Really cool varieties. After that, there was a nice article from Michael Paletta. He had 2 this week. He basically has gone through and broken down how to start a tank, how to maintain a tank, and right now he's talking about the importance of setting up an aquarium log and keeping track of all of your numbers. He's been in it forever. Really good to pay attention to. After that, Levi, he writes for us sometimes. He had a great article about Molly Miller blennies. He's really knows everything about the Caribbean. He's big into NPS. He's a really smart guy, younger guy. He's around my age. But yeah, Molly Miller's potential replacement for aptasia control. After that, Jeremy had an article up talking about the new tank that Max Spector's releasing. Basically has all of their hardware integrated into one tank, really clean looking, really interesting. It's probably where the future of tank manufacturing is going to be going. I could see many of the other basically manufacturers partnering up with something like Hydros or Apex, or even some of the higher end European lines, something like the GHL systems, or maybe Mastertronic. And then after that, we had an update to make sure to watch the new Reef Therapy episode, number 93. It's out now. They were live from the Reef Builders studio. Evie was on that one. And then I had my article about the integration of omics technology, which I'm happy to break down after I cover the rest of these. Michael Paletta had an article about what you should look at when you're buying a frag. Is it encrusted? Is it healthy? Is it a freshly cut frag? Very important information. And then the last article of this week was about the new Orbit LED light, which, in Jeremy's opinion, is some of the best bang for your buck you can get. Yeah, Molly Miller's, I've heard, can be very aggressive. I've not had one, but I have heard a lot of mixed opinions. I believe Levi pointed out in the article that not a lot of the Molly Millers on the market are actually true ones. I'm not even sure. Like I say, my expertise is coral, fish, or even out of it. But yeah, so that's kind of the initial recap of what was posted this week. If any of those articles sounded interesting, be sure to check them out on the website. We have plenty more articles in the pipeline, some very interesting interviews to stay tuned for. But I think the first question I saw was about Fiji live rock. So, from my understanding, actual live rock from the ocean is still illegal, but Walt Smith just goes and does what a lot of the Caribbean companies now do, where they take man-made rock, so think Marco rock, and throw it in the ocean, and then it becomes live and has the same, microfauna that you would from actual live rock. That way, it's a much more sustainable practice. There's not really any harm done to the environment that way because it's put in there for a couple of weeks and then taken back out. I know all of that rock is coming in because I'm trying to get a sample of it, because I want to see what its microbiome is and see if it's any different. That'll be a future article that I cover. Let's see, what did Remy say? Mine would sit outside the water on a gyre pump waiting for food. That sounds like most blennies. Most blennies are kind of hogs. Any blenny that I've had just sits there. They'll be like an overflow pipe or on a coral and just wait to gorge themselves. So that's the recap for the week. I can open up to questions. If there's not any questions either related to my article or anything in general about reefing, then I'm happy to go on any rant that you all would like me to. I was thinking I could talk about coral, the coral immune response, or coral pathogens. That's kind of my wheelhouse. Or I could talk about my article in depth if anyone has not got a chance to read it. What's up, Jughead? Nice to see you. I haven't heard from you in a while. Alright, so I'll give it like 10 seconds because there's usually like some lag. If no one's got any questions, then would you rather hear me talk about my article or talk about the coral immune response? Or do you have a third option? I can talk about whatever. I know there was quite a few questions people asked about on different posts, but there was like 6 different posts we had, so I was not able to get those organized in time to answer them. I think we're going to come up with a much more streamlined method for doing this in the future, to where we can have all the questions either in a group or something like that. We basically would need like a uniform comments section. Let's hear about the article. What's going on when we set up new aquariums? Why does it need time from Acropore to jump in, and can we make this process faster? Okay, I'll answer that question first, then I'll talk about my article. So, I don't think that every tank needs time to put an Acropore in. I've known many people who just will throw rock and water and then not even cycle the tank, and you can throw Acros in. So, I think that the typical thing that comes with keeping Acros is you really want people to be familiar with having stability, doing a lot of the routine maintenance, and getting a handle on how to reef keep in general. So if you don't have the basics down, you're going to kill an acro. So it's kind of the same thing as NIMS. There's not necessarily a reason why you need to wait to add these animals if you already know what you're doing. But if you're starting out, it's definitely a good idea to wait. Get some coralline algae growth. That shows that the tank has the correct chemistry to support calcification. Things like that. But if there's any actual anecdotal reason for why you're having trouble having acros die in the beginning, I would say, could be a number of different swings that are associated with the ugly stage, and some of those could be biological. Yeah, that's one thing, but otherwise I think it's just kind of a moniker in the hobby to make sure that people that are just starting out are more likely to have success. You mentioned something about an ick vaccine. Can you tell us more about that? Yes, that was Taras's article from last week. It was very interesting. There's a number of people, different universities, and also some people in the industry that farm fish that are working on trying to make a vaccine. So, this depends on the type of fish. The fish we're familiar with. There's other types of things where there's like lampreys, where they're technically fish, but they're really ancient fish that have like a lot of cartilage and things. They're a little bit more of a rudimentary form. But for the fish that we are used to in our tanks, they have a very similar immune response to humans. So they have the innate immune system, which is kind of like, think about the equivalent of a white blood cell, right? You've just got these guys going around your system and eating whatever pathogen they come in contact with. It's not targeted at all. And then there's also the adaptive immune system, which is what, vaccines come into play with humans. So that's our antibodies. That's a type of immune response which is targeted towards a specific pathogen. So, like I said, I am really simplifying this. If you have more questions, I could type you a whole book. I'm actually in an immunology class right now, so this is like right up my alley. But basically, the way that antibodies and the adaptive immune system works is, think about it like 2 pieces of Velcro, right? Or like a puzzle piece is probably a better example. You will have an antibody and it only fits into a specific antigen. It's a very specific puzzle piece. So it's a one-to-one recognition. So an example of this is like, let's say I get the flu. If I've had that exact strain, like basically same strain of the flu virus in the past, I already have, they're called memory cells, so my body has fought that off and remembered what that bad guy looked like. So if that ever happens, you'll have your innate immune system that are kind of like the watchdogs. They'll go and say, oh my god, it's this guy again. They'll go recruit the adaptive immune system. Then you'll have that antibody go and bump into it. And if they lock together, if it's that same guy it recognized in the past, they're like, okay, we know how to beat it, it's on. Get all of the armed forces, we're calling everyone, and then you fight off the infection. So you don't actually have to encounter this disease in the wild to get your immune system to begin to categorize and fight it for the future. This is how vaccines work. You take a virus, a bacterial pathogen, fungal pathogen, whatever, and basically what we do as humans is, there's much more advanced techniques now, but how we used to do it is we used to heat them up, which killed the bacteria, virus, whatever, and then inject it into people. So there were still little tiny pieces of that pathogen that your body could recognize, but it was no longer alive to where it could do damage. So and then basically you form those same memory cells and your body is more adept to fight that if it ever encounters it in the wild. That's the crux of all vaccination. So because fish have a very, very similar type of adaptive immune response. They also have antibodies. They have a different immunoglobulins and things like that, which if you want to know, I can really go into it. But the idea is you could take and basically have an antigen serum of cryptochyron, of ick, and you could inject it into fish, and they would be able to form immunity to ick. So if they ever encountered it in a farm through like having new stock come in or things like that, they would be fine. They already have immunity to it. So in terms of how that could be applied to the aquarium industry, it would probably cost quite a bit of money. Vaccines, at least in the beginning, are pretty hard to scale up and really require a lot of manufacturing capacity to have them pull through. But for people that are really hardcore fish collectors that have very rare fish, it could be something in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, might be on the market to where you could take your fish in a tank or something to the vet and get a vaccination. It'd probably be more likely the vet comes to you. But yeah, so that was a very long-winded response, but vaccines for fish are very possible. I can say not really for corals. Corals do not have an adaptive immune response. They have kind of rudimentary ones where they can recognize basically self versus non-self, which I'm going to have an article about this, about how corals can graft, but not a thing for corals, but is a thing for fish. Okay, so this could be a process for more expensive, larger fish or farms to send fish in that are very ick resistant. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that also could be a route to develop a vaccine. If you already have fish that have gotten ick and survived, you could extract basically the equivalent of lymph from them and make that a serum instead of manufacturing it from the ground up. There's also the possibility of designing an antibody outside of a living system. They're called monoclonal antibodies, to where it could respond to it as well. That's extremely expensive, though, like $30,000 a dose type of thing, which is why monoclonal antibodies were not so much a thing with COVID. They could have worked, but they're just so expensive that the vaccine was rolled out instead. Okay, I had like 10 more questions that I just... Yeah, okay, let's see. I've got fat thumbs, too, so it makes it to where it rolls up. I was thinking about that vibrator for chasing worms out of the rocks again. Okay, so Jughead used to come on a live stream. I used to work for another shop. We sold coral, and he was one of the better customers there. And one time he said, have you ever thought about a specific vibration being able to wipe things out? He was talking about ultrasound. So I had just done a research project on the future of medicine for school. And basically, this is not really something that I think could be applied to the hobby super easily. It would be very expensive and require a lot of research and development. But it was something I thought about that was really cool, and I'll bring it up because Jughead's here. So the idea, or what the science says now, is that pretty much every single living species, their cell membrane vibrates at a certain frequency. So if you take an ultrasound device, you can actually have the inverse of that frequency be generated. And they've figured out with pathogens, it basically, like if you think about two waves, they cancel each other out, the cell pops, and they die. So they're thinking they could use ultrasound as a targeted way to destroy cancer cells, to destroy localized infections. So the example of all the articles that I had read was people that get hip replacement or knee replacement. There's a lot of internal infections and biofilms that can form on that new localized area, but it's very hard to get any type of medication there. And typically biofilms are antibiotic resistant, or you have an antibiotic resistant strain of bacteria that already worked its way in there because hospitals are rampant with them. And even if you're sterile, if you're doing a procedure, there's always a chance now, which is scary. So their thought was take an ultrasound device, figure out what the pathogen is, and you could tune the sound and use sound waves to kill that pathogen. So the only way I could think about this is if you had a similar setup to a UV sterilizer, you had an ultrasound device, and instead of changing the flow rate, you could change the frequency. And if you were to do, someone had to pour probably millions of dollars into this, but you could culture out every single specific pathogen that could affect fish, could affect corals, could affect inverts, and determine what frequency their cell membrane is. And then you could have this miracle product where you could selectively eliminate whatever you wanted from your microbiome. That's probably 50 years out, if anything. But yeah, that's the crazy pipe dream of microbial management that I talked about one night with Jughead. Okay, let's see. Is PAR as impactful as people make it out to be? Depends on the coral, right? So sticks and things like that, coral that are naturally from shallower water, PAR is very important. Also, if you adapt things up to higher PAR over time, over a long time, you can get faster growth. I think, though, that spectrum is much, much more important than PAR. So this is if any sponsors are here, sorry, but I think that LEDs are not as efficient or good at growing coral as T5s, halides, VHOs, any of the old school stuff. And this isn't just my opinion. This is supported by copious amounts of science. So there's something called the sunblock hypothesis of pigment development in coral, which is something that I subscribe to, and there's a lot of data supporting it. It's not confirmed, it's a theory, but there is quite a bit of data behind it. So what this says is that corals develop pigments as a response to blocking different wavelengths of light, which could become carcinogenic over time. So if you think about how there's melanin in an individual's skin that can block out UVB, UVA, and prevent melanoma. It's a protection, that's a pigment in human skin that develops. Corals have an assortment, many, many more pigments than we do, and each of those pigments corresponds to a different wavelength of light. So this entire process of cooking corals or getting, acros that are brown to become rainbow, PAR is, there is a part of the equation there, but it's mostly spectrum. So here is the way that I've been able to kind of quantify it or make it make sense to me when I first started reading about these ideas. And that is, the higher PAR you have, the higher density of pigments you have that are already existing. And the broader spectrum you have, the more diversity of pigments you get. So the broader the spectrum, the more pigments that are going to develop of different colors to block and correspond to those different spectrums. The higher PAR you have, the more those existing, basically, pigments are going to grow in concentration. So, in complete layman's terms, the higher PAR you have, the brighter your coral looks with the existing colors it already has, depending on the coral. I'll talk about exceptions. And then the broader the spectrum, you're going to get more colors that develop from that coral just naturally. So, having halides or T5s, you have all the way from UVB to infrared. And no LED on the market captures that wide of a spectrum. Now, you've got Orphix, and Orphix, I think, are probably the best. They have an amber LED, which is a 660 nanometer peak, and that's something that not a lot of the other cob-based LEDs have on the market, which can really help color things up. I like Orphix a lot. I think that LEDs are useful in a hybrid setting, right? So, I've got, Radion T5 Reef Bright right there. The Radion is what does all of the heavy lifting in terms of PAR. You can pump down a lot of PAR, like 420 nanometers, but I've got the T5s for everything else. Then on my primary system, I've got T5s and halides, and I have Reef Brights for the pop, and it's basically all a wider or more daylight spectrum. So that's kind of how you cook corals, not just in my opinion, but in science's opinion. And there's a lot of data that they've done. It's mostly with Acros, but there are certain par values to where certain pigments will peak. So I read this study, and they took wild Acros and threw them in like 300 par, 333, and then they just expanded it all the way up to like 700. And they were able to basically determine the density and how these different pigments grew. So I believe it was like at 550 par was the average of all of the pigments being the highest they could be. If you push it to like 750, like real crazy, then oranges would peak, but you would have less greens because of that. So, at least according to science, to color up your Acros and get them the brightest, 550 par is your best bet, and then as broad of a spectrum as possible. And that's science and so much anecdotal data. I mean, a lot of the really, really serious coral farmers, they don't use LEDs. I mean, maybe some like, for the blue pop, like the OR3 bars, Reef Brights, Luma Bright, whatever you want to call it. But halides are still the way to go. And I mean, anecdotally, I can tell you right now, my coral has never grown faster or looked better. So that was kind of answering two questions. Someone asked, how do you cook corals? The answer is that, plus a lot of stability. And then someone else, let's see. Sorry, I kind of go on tangents, but this is what this is for. Man, I really need like a better way to scroll on this. How long until I'm Dr. Salem? Decades. I'm not even done with my undergrad, man. And then it's going to be quite a long time after that. T5 for the win. What's up? I had success with ATI hybrid. Yes. All right, so yeah, that's all the questions. I think I answered them all. Unless I missed one. If I missed one, then go ahead and type it in. But there's my little rants answering those. I'm glad to just talk about whatever. I mean, this is what this is for. It's just to kind of chill and talk about coral. I like talking about coral. I figured that a lot of my stuff I talk about gets lost in translation with my articles, so it's a good way to just sit here and get to talk about coral and answer people's questions. I also feel like I'm not trying to be cocky or toot my own horn, but I feel that I'm very well read in terms of the literature, in terms of cutting-edge research on corals. I read tons and tons of peer-reviewed articles a day, so I'm able to give a unique point of view from the angle of science. What's your question, Remy? And then I will get to yours, Logan, and then it looks like Jessica has one too. Wow. 3 in a row. What kind of cancers do corals get? This is something that we don't really understand, and I mean like the scientific community. There's not been a ton of data about that. Obviously, though, there seems to be some evidence of carcinogenic events, like you've got bounce mushrooms. It seems to be a benign tumor, though. But I've seen some articles to where there's like oncogenes for coral potentially. So probably, coral can get cancer. But I would say that, and this is going to sound kind of sad, but a coral that we have in captivity or the wild is a lot, like it's very unlikely to die from cancer before it dies from an assortment of other things. I mean, there's bacterial issues, fungal issues. I mean, there's a plethora of things that can really cause problems for corals. Lack of nutrients, all of it. The whole dysbiosis article I wrote, I mean, it's a whole thing. So if you're lucky enough to get a coral to thrive and live for 30, 40, 50 years to where it can get exposed to enough carcinogens to get cancer, probably, but I mean, there's not a lot of data about it right now just because it's not as pressing of a concern as many of the other diseases, excuse me, that are affecting things like the stony coral tissue loss disease in the Caribbean has wiped out an assortment of species, for instance. There's black band disease, brown band disease. There's a ton of different things that are affecting coral right now, and it's all a lot worse because of the abiotic stress from warming oceans and acidic oceans. How do you feel about AI lights? I mean, yeah, I just kind of had my whole rant about lighting. If you didn't catch it, I think that, they're basically, same old cob LEDs, same as Radions pretty much. Very similar spectrum, very similar power output. They're a really good option to get into the hobby. And as a beginner-friendly option, they make coral look great. They can grow coral relatively well. But if you're really, really wanting to chase the dragon, they simply don't produce the spectrum that coral truly need to thrive. That's my opinion on them. And it's not just AI. I mean, it's all LEDs on the market. I'm not discriminating against any individual brand. What's up, Amy? Nice to see you pop on. I have a question. That was Remy. Oh, dosing bacteria on a regular basis. Kind of. I won't really divulge what I'm doing, but I think the hydrospace products are great. I think the hydrospace stuff is really great. I think ProBio makes a lot of sense as a way to feed coral. Coral eat bacteria. That's pretty much the majority of their diet. A lot of the bacteria that coral kind of farm, if you would, as a constant food supply, or that may be planktonic and float by them, are lost when we bring them into aquaculture. They just, because we give them nutrition in other ways, a lot of these obligate symbiotes will kind of disassociate from the coral's microbial system, which can cause, I think, them to be more susceptible to diseases and stuff as well. There's technically, the red stuff. Taras would be great to talk about it. He knows more than me, I am sure, about all the different strains of phytoplankton. I know some stuff, but not as much as that guy. But yeah, any of the red phytoplanktons, those are also bacterial plankton, which are great. Any of that stuff gives carotenoids to the coral and your fish, can help them color up, can also bioremediate in your tank at the same time and eat excess nitrogenous waste products. I mean, it's good. But a lot of the bacteria on the market, I won't say it's snake oil because it does serve a role, but it is not coral-associated bacteria, right? So, I mean, you've got, like, your Microbacter 19 and all of that. And it just, wastewater bacteria. It can certainly consume a lot of those excess compounds and maybe serve as food to the coral, but it's not going to be the exact same benefit as one. Biodigest is actually some legit stuff. You can get a hold of it. Someone sent in some Aquab Biomics, and it's basically like a little coral holobiome. They must do like a cold culture thing or have a lot of different things they culture. Or honestly, it might just be enriched natural seawater where they filter out the pathogens. But yes, Biodigest is very good. I would use that, but it's just hard to get a hold of nowadays. Biodigest, Hydrospace. I like EcoBalance by Dr. Timms as well. As well as that, I guess I don't have it handy. But on Dr. Timms' website, he gives you like a little TLDR of how to culture EcoBalance. I've got it right here. I'll show you guys. Okay, so here's the industrial jug of EcoBalance. And then they sell this little product called First Defense, which is like a multivitamin for fish, right? But this also happens to be a great carbon and nutrient source to grow these guys. So then, I got the whole culture here too. Look at this. So then you get this like little crappy $5 thing from Walmart, and you put an airline in it, and then you let it set, and then you have unlimited EcoBalance always. So it's great. It's heterotrophic. It eats Vibrio, and it also acts as coral food. But don't dose too much of it because it can drop your nutrients. It will consume excess nitrates and phosphates. But that's also a great way. Yeah, that's awesome. I had it sitting right there, so I could have gave a, yeah. Okay, let's see. What are you speaking about at Reef Stock? I see you have your own booth. What type of coral will you bring for sale? And finally, do you and Taras hang out together every day? Would love to see you two debate something. Taras and I are very, very involved with each other. We have something of a long-distance relationship. I get tickets down to Orlando sometimes just to see them. Don't tell either of our partners, but yes, we're very close. I've not talked to the guy that much at all. That's all a joke. But no, I'd love to. I don't know if there's much that him and I would disagree on. If there is something that him and I disagree on, I'm sure we could have a really good conversation about it. But we seem to be pretty like-minded in a lot of things that he talks about, a lot of things that I talk about. In terms of things I'm going to bring to Reef Stock, what does everyone want to see at Reef Stock? I'll bring whatever. I'll order whatever. I've got some maintenance accounts. I've got aquaculture coral in. I can go harvest. I can get just about anything. So whatever you want, I'll bring. I'll also be bringing a metric That's not, never mind, I'll say PG. A lot of copepods and phyto. I have like a 6 or 7 strain blend, depending on if I harvest all of them, of both phyto and pods. So a lot of live food. I'll be bringing a lot of coral, mostly high-end zoas. I've got a lot of high-end zoas. I've got a lot of really unique ones I've been growing out that I've named that I've not seen elsewhere. In terms of what I'm going to be speaking about at Reef Stock, I am going to be talking about, how should I word this? It is basically debating the one disease, one pathogen model. So in terms of how humans get disease, we're very familiar with this. You get the flu, you have symptoms of the flu, it was the flu that caused it. You get COVID, it was the COVID virus that caused it. But with corals, it's not like that. And typically, there's a lot of ignorance and misinformation in this industry right now about how coral disease and illness works. From people who, no offense, have no idea what they're talking about a lot of the time. I'm not trying to be, pretentious at all, but a lot of this is a very, very complex thing that most like scientific journals, anything published, I mean, it's an evolving field where the papers come out every single day, and every single paper has a new hypothesis or theory or idea, and there's different debating ideologies within this, 4, 5, 6 different perspectives of how this might work. I mean, there's a cacophony of mechanisms for how bleaching might work, and we still don't understand it with millions of dollars that globally we've thrown at it. So it's a very complex issue, but the leading theory that I subscribe to is one of the pathobiome and dysbiosis. And this is the idea that it's not just one bad guy, but rather the environment causes external stress on the coral, and that causes a lot of the good guys that live on the coral to become bad. So it's this Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde type of transformation. And there's the eco-balance. There, it looks like there's a link. But yeah, it's not that there's a single pathogen causing these disease states that we see, but rather it's a polymicrobial, basically amalgamation of lots of different bad guys. And the only way that we're going to get to a point to where we can solve these issues is if we begin thinking about them in the right way, and that requires dispelling a lot of misinformation about how, at least what the science says now, corals work. So that's what I'm going to be talking about at Reef Stock. A lot of coral disease. I'm going to break down a ton of papers. It's going to be like Coral Disease 101. I'm going to structure it how a lot of my classes are structured and make it very academic. Okay, let's see. I really need to put this on a computer somehow. I have a bunch of Walmart dosing containers. Yes, they are the best. They're the cheapest option. How do you handle dinos? So, a lot of different ways you can handle dinos. In terms of how I've handled them, I guess first I'll explain kind of how dinos happen. So dinos can happen from kind of 3 primary pathways. So first is you bottomed out on your nutrients. Everything else that's in your tank no longer can compete, and they're this ancient microorganism that then can survive in an ultra-low nutrient environment. And they just are like, what's up, show up to the party, they're everywhere, they produce toxins, they're terrible. So that's one, is you've bottomed out on your nutrients. 2, there's a lack of biodiversity. A lot of people that use antibiotics in tank will then get a dinoflagellant bloom. So that's, if you wipe out a lot of the good guys, that also eliminates that competition in another way. It creates a power vacuum for all these different microbial species to fight, and the most adept one will win. It's natural selection occurring at a very rapid pace in our aquariums. And then number 3 is you can actually have them occur if there's an imbalance in your nutrients as well. So let's say you've got crazy high phosphates but 0 nitrates. You can have the inverse as well, and dinos can also pop up that time because they're out competing other organisms. Things can't really handle those nutrient loads, or they don't work as effectively if they're out of whack. A lot of stuff that we still don't understand. These are general overviews. So here's my checklist for how I beat dinos. 1, you're going to want to test your nitrates and phosphates immediately, because that's most likely the culprit. 2, if you dose Cipro or something like that, then you're going to need to get some of that bacteria back. And some of the only way to do that is probably live rock or live sand, maybe some ProBio, BioDigest, things like that. But, you're still not ever going to get that diversity back unless you're probably adding things from the ocean. And that can come with its own risk too. So like one of the best options is if you can actually get a chance when Aquab Biomics, they have sand in stock. Sometimes it's very rare, and if they get it, it's sold out like immediately. But if you get some of their sand, they basically have it to where they've eliminated all the pathogenic strains and it's only beneficial strains of bacteria in that sand. And they have confirmed that because they're Aquab Biomics, they've done all the genetic testing on it. So what the best option to do, like if you're ever able, if any of you are ever able to buy that sand, I would buy it, just have it on deck in case you just like need like a little shot of like biodiversity, a little bacterial shot to throw in your tank. I would get like a 10-gallon Rubbermaid or like a brute trash can or something, throw dry sand in it. Like get like crappy play sand or like a aragonite sand, get some type of sand that is not live. Seed all of that with this sand, and then you have an unlimited amount of this really, really solid sand with a great microbial profile. So yeah, you get a nice report with the sand. There you go. And it shows you what's in it. I haven't actually ordered it. So yeah, get your nutrients up, get your biodiversity up. You can also add pods and phyto. If you add like any bottled bacteria, it's going to help, except for like some of the strains that will consume nitrates and phosphates, because at that point, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Now, depending on the strain, UV sterilizers can knock them out, but I am kind of against UV in a lot of cases because that also knocks out your biodiversity. It's just a Band-Aid solution. So let's say you've got some of the strains that can get taken out by UV because they go waterborne. Well, if your nutrients are still zero, your coral are going to die. Like you're not fixing the issue. It's definitely kind of the easiest way to get rid of it, but it does not truly fix that imbalance that's occurring. So, and then also blackouts can help a lot. So when I've got them, I do like I throw everything at it. I dose nutrients, I feed really heavy, I turn off all of my filtration, I then go and have like a blackout in the tank for 3 days, throw some phyto in, throw some pods in, throw some bacteria in, and every time I've done that, I get rid of dinos in like a week. So that's the thing. People are like, you got to use Dino X or you got to use ChemiClean. Like that's not going to work. You got to kind of understand how these organisms begin to have a bloom from a biological perspective and work backwards to solve that problem. But yeah, that basically takes care of every single type of dinos. All dinos will arise in that way. Just some can be dealt with UV or not, which is where you really need to differentiate the different types of dinos. But again, I don't think UV is a long-term solution. I think that, honestly, it could be shooting yourself in the foot and creating more of a biological desert. Does anyone have a link to these Walmart dosing containers? I have a feeling if I ask the greeters them, I'll get a blank stare. So I worked at Walmart, and here is a hack. Get the Walmart app. If you look up anything on the Walmart app, you will get a code, and you can go to the aisle exactly. You don't have to talk to anyone. No human interaction. It tells you if it's in stock before you even go there. That is the best way to do it. And you can sync your location to your local Walmart. Okay, thoughts on phyto. I love phyto. I culture a lot of it. It's great. It is really awesome in like 70 ways. But Taras is like definitely the better person to talk to about that. Like I said, I can talk about it, but not as eloquently as him. That's like his love child. Let's see. I heard Remy had some trouble with UV. Know anything about that? Yeah, I think I heard something about that. Yeah, it's near the Tupperware aisle. It's always like with the to-go food stuff. Okay, I think I lost... I think there's a couple other questions I saw that I didn't answer. Will lectures be on live broadcast? Oh, yeah, we could probably live broadcast them. We're looking at... what can you say about Vibrio affecting coral? There we go. That's my type of question. Okay, so Vibriosis, they're a very large group of pathogens. They, are implicated in most every coral disease in terms of wild corals. They're not as often found in our aquariums, though. Sometimes, yes, but it's not the main culprit. So this is where that kind of my Reef Stock talk comes in. Is this disputing this one disease, one pathogen model. Most people like to think that Vibrio is the root cause of all of this, which is where some of the ideas of using Cipro comes from, but it's just simply not. I mean, Vibrio can complicate things, but it's often Vibrio and like 10 other species of bacteria that are pathogenic or opportunistic that come into play and then can up the virulence of Vibrio. They can form three-dimensional polymicrobial biofilms together, things like that. They kind of all work together synergistically, but Vibrio in particular is a fairly nasty one, especially because it can actually directly find sick corals. So there's some types of infochemicals that corals will produce when they're stressed out. And Vibrio has evolved, it's been predating coral and zooxanthellae for long enough to sniff out those signals like an individual, like little like watchdog or something. It's like, it's like the Pavlov experiment where you ring the bell and the dog's mouth waters, same type of thing. It's like a dinner bell to them, or it's like vultures circling prey. So they're able to go and directly target corals that are already susceptible to infection, which is what's really nasty about them. But I think that's something that's really conserved among many other coral pathogens. I think it's more than Vibrio, but I don't have the data for that yet. But I think that might be the case. I think that's kind of a universal pathway for infection in corals. And it's something that I'm kind of looking at. Yeah, it's definitely a fish pathogen. It's kind of a pathogen, the entire family writ large in a lot of marine species. I mean, there's Vibrio harveyi, Vibrio fisheri, Vibrio coralliticus. I mean, there's an assortment of them. There's even some Vibrios that I believe can affect humans. I'll double check it right now because I don't want to give you false information. Vibrio infection in human. Vibrio bacteria can cause 3 types of infections: gastrointestinal, wound, and blood. Looks like it affects humans too, so there you go. It's just kind of generally a bad guy across, the animal kingdom or life at large. It tends to be a pathogen. But Vibrio can also be good. There are some good Vibrios, right? So some Vibrio subspecies are in the coral's microbiome and really assist with nutrient cycling. Now, many of those can become pathogenic if external conditions change, but that's also what part of this knowing your enemy and understanding what actually causes these infections is, because if we're trying to just wipe out Vibrio, not every Vibrio is the enemy. It's a very brutal stereotype towards them. It's not all bad. There are some that are very, very good microorganisms that really benefit corals, and that's something that not a lot of people talk about at all. BRS is now carrying ProBio. Oh, that's awesome. I did not know they were carrying Biodigest. Maybe I will just order some right now. Let's see. Do I dose calc? Yes, I do. Kalkwasser is the bee's knees. High pH gang. 8.6, baby. I also like sodium hydroxide, though. So, sometimes if calc is not cutting it, sodium hydroxide is the way to go. You can get a little bit higher of a pH buffer that way. You got to dose 2 parts still, but yeah. I want to expand on this talk, so I'll reach out to you, but Biodigest you can get off Amazon. Yeah, I've really not looked to order it in a very long time, but I guess there's a ton of it that's available. But yeah, I believe it was the Moonshiners group where someone actually sent in Aquab Biomics for it, and just the general Biodigest, I believe, had a pretty diverse. I'll go pull it up right now, and then we can talk about what's in it. Facebook. Let's see if I can still find it. I think Telegram did it. He always does that type of cool stuff. While I'm looking for this, so we can talk about this in depth more. This is something that's very cool about Aquab Biomics that not a lot of people realize. So people think it's inaccurate, but it's really not. It's extremely accurate technology. It's the same stuff that pretty much whoever uses in a lab. It's the same type of meta-barcoding technology. Like, people don't realize that this is lab-grade academic technology. This is the same technology that is the root that is driving all of the omics age, which if you read my article, you'll kind of get an idea of what that is. But it's not like it's a hobby version of this. I mean, Dr. Meyer, he's published several peer-reviewed articles using this technology to do phylogenetic studies in other animals and in coral. So he took his access to the technology and simply marketed it because the cost of genetics technology has gone down so much to where you can have a test and have a product. but it's not inaccurate. It's not like snake oil. Like, it's legit. Like, I'm likely going to use them for my research simply because it's cheaper than actually going and doing all this work myself, and my university doesn't actually have access to the next-gen sequencing that his lab does. If I were to send it out to another third party, it would cost me double, triple the cost per sample when it's the exact same technology. So, you know, if this is good enough to, like, it's good enough to do actual science with, is what I'm saying. So, because of that, we as reefers in this community represents the largest number of scientists, you know, basically out there. We all have a familiarity with science and how it works because this hobby is basically just, it's very science-based. There's a very deep understanding of biology and chemistry that comes with growing corals in your house. And here's the thing, if anyone has ideas for how to shift your microbiome, for how to beat ick, for how to do anything, you can now verify it. You could try it and send in before and after with Aquab Biomics, and together we can have anecdotal data to prove that a certain method works. So there's like an assortment of kind of hobbyist level scientific studies that I would love for a small group of people to pool together and start putting some money into. One of them is carbon dosing, right? So I think that, like, carbon dosing, there's still a lot of questions we don't have answered. And that is the carbon source. Can it really affect what type of bacteria are eating things? And the short answer to the long answer to this is you could do qPCR and see what genes are being transcribed, but no one has the money or the time to do that. So by doing Aquab Biomics, like let's say that the question is, does Pelagibacter utilize acetic acid better than another carbon source? So you do vinegar versus vodka, and you see what families rise or fall as you carbon dose in your tank. And that would be extremely useful information to have for the hobby because it would provide an alternative to antibiotics, which I think we desperately need to shift the microbiome. I mean, just by having, like, carbon dosing essentially acts as a prebiotic. You're just providing a food supply for all these bacteria, and if you get the right prebiotic, essentially, the right carbon source, then you could grow selective groups that would be beneficial. I think there's a lot of snake oil out there about this, though. Certain people that claim specific polymers grow good bacteria only. I cast a lot of doubt on that, and if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, but I'm not trying to get hit with slander right now, so yeah. But there's a lot of snake oil carbon dosing out there. Okay, let's see. Well, now I don't see this this whole thing from Telegram about ProBio. That sucks. Yeah, if someone does that, tag me in the post and I'll talk about it the next live, but I can't find it on the Moonshiners group. Might have got taken down. I remember there was like Pseudo-Ultramonas in there, I think, and Pelagibacter. There was some kind of interesting fellows that were in it. Made me question how they... I don't think they cultured it. I think what they did is they probably took seawater, and they probably grew some stuff up. It's on IG. I do not have an IG. I was way too addicted to Instagram. I deleted it. Let me look up Biodigest. Let me try that. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right, let's flip the camera. All right, here is certain Bacter 19. You know what I'm talking about. And basically, it is all just like a normal bacillus. Nothing really special. Here is Biodigest. Look at that. Beautiful. And look, there's some Vibrio. So the question is that good Vibrio? Is it bad Vibrio? That we don't know because the publicly available version of Aquab Biomics only goes down to the family level. What I'd be interested in doing is seeing a species-level breakdown of this and seeing if they have pathogenic ones. So this makes me much more likely to believe that this is most likely just ocean water, that they then throw some carbon sources in and they just grow all the bacteria up into higher concentrations. They probably filter... Oh, yeah, welcome to Topeka, Kansas. I live in a hellhole, let me tell you. It is not a great place in terms of crime. But, yeah. Anyways, I think probably what they do is they filter out any potential contaminants. You could just use carbon, you could use a micron filter, whatever. Then they probably just throw some media in there to grow the bacteria, because this represents a very, very diverse microbial profile, which you would often see in the ocean. The only thing, so Pelagibacter is the most common microbe in the ocean. It usually has like a crazy band like this. If you're actually taking open ocean water. So the fact that that is smaller doesn't dispute that hypothesis. I think what it means is that some of these other guys, such as Pseudomonas, could outcompete them. The fact they have Pseudomonas is also weird, because that's typically kind of like a strain that people use for commercial purposes, similar to the Bacillus here, which is literally all of the other product, which I will not say the name of because I do not want to get lawsuited right now. But yeah, so that's kind of my theory on how they make this. It is probably not perfect, but it is probably a pretty good option for doing things right now. So yeah, that's that. Let's see. What's the standard good level of these bacteria? What are the standards based on? That I never understood. That you will need to message me, and I will consult you for $100. That is what keeps me relevant in the consulting business. So that is something that I had, like say, it differs in the coral, it differs on the environment in the world, but it is something that it changes based on other external factors for sure. But there are some species that are good and that you want in a certain range and in proportion to others. And a lot of this is just now being eluded by science, but a lot of it is also very, very backed up. So, I mean, obviously you want to try to get the pathogens down, but there's some of those other ones that you want to really get up. Yeah, Remy messages me about 5 times a day. He was asking me he had an ATI test kit. He was like, what color is this? I said, it might be yellow. You might have ammonia. Someone said something about sodium. So I can dose sodium hydroxide just like dosing calc. You're going to want to, yeah, way lower. It's much, much more concentrated. It's much more caustic. You get a pH above 14. So yeah, it's like it basically only does alk. It's not going to do your calcium like kalkwasser does. But yeah, sodium hydroxide has a more effective pH boost compared to kalkwasser. But you don't get the calcium. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of place for kalkwasser, I think. I just think sodium hydroxide is awesome because if you've got a very high demand tank, then you can use less, you can waste less money basically by having sodium hydroxide. And hell, we'll open some mail. I'll show you what I order. I ordered some sodium hydroxide like 2 days ago, and it just got here. So we'll see if this is it. It's likely this one, but this is the trick for ordering any chemicals. Most people are looking for lab grade, and I think that we should aim higher than lab grade. I really hope that this is the right package and this is not like something else, because I don't really know what I've ordered this week. I think all Reef stuff. I'm not trying to, I've done enough product placement tonight though. Oh yeah, see, ABC reagent. Never mind. I guess we're doing more. It's the other box. Yeah, this sounds like sodium hydroxide. It's a really small package though, but it'll make a lot. Jesus, I need a razor blade. Oh yeah, look at that. Cut myself. That was really stupid of me. This has now become an unboxing channel. Yeah, I had no idea. There we go. ABC reagent. It's cheaper than the other stuff. That's the pitch. Same thing, cheaper price. Pretty cool company. It's the generic. Really packed this. That or I need to hit the gym. Probably both. Okay, here we go. Let's look at this beautiful bottle and let's talk about how to order chemicals. So, if you look right here, reagent grade, that's what you're looking for. You've got like food grade, actually, I'll start down here. Food grade, then you've got lab grade, and most people are like, this is the holy grail, this is what they use in labs. But not really. What you're really looking for is reagent grade. This is what's used in reactions. There's pretty much like, no impurities, very little if there is. Now there's there's grades above this, like ones that are kind of standard grades, that are used as a certified standard for things like gas chromatography and stuff like that, but it is extremely expensive. And at this point, if it's already at a reagent grade, the chances of having like any heavy metals or things like that in it that could show up on ICP is very, very unlikely. But lab grade stuff, like there's so many companies out there that say pharma grade, you know, and if people have ICP tested a lot of the different Kalkwasser brands, and like 80% of the Kalkwasser on the market is has heavy metals in it. Quick disclaimer. Oh, it's because I showed drugs? Is that why? Or did I say a bad word? Yes, I'm using a Trident. I'd like to use a Mastertronic, but I do not have the money to afford one, so I think I traded for a Trident a really long time ago, or bought one. You could use Drano. I really thought about it. This was like $5 more than Drano, though. So, but yeah, I was in a pinch, and I was like, do I go buy some calc at the store or Drano at the store? And I decided to just order this because it's $5 more. Yeah, please no one sue me. I am a broke college student. I will not be able to settle out of court or continue a battle. How do you get rid of heavy metals? A couple different ways. Some products like Triton Detox are good options. It's pretty hard to find nowadays, though. I think it's like humeric acid is what it is, so it's kind of like a flatulent, but it flatulates all of the heavy metals, and then carbon can remove it. So that's a really good option. The number one thing you want if you're wanting to remove heavy metals, though, is to figure out the source of them, right? So if it's coming through in your source water, then that's a big issue. You need to upgrade the RODI system by quite a bit, or replace the resin, or whatever you have to do, right? But if it's not coming through your source water, then could be a magnet, could be a pump. I would check all of your equipment, all of your magnetic racks, check like this. Like I've had so many random things I've dropped in my tanks while doing maintenance, like razor blades. I've seen, like I've worked at different shops, I've seen people have pennies in tanks, like just excess copper and nickel, like really terrible stuff. I saw on not on YouTube, Facebook, some guy found a $20 bill in his filter sock. Like there's crazy stuff that ends up in our tanks. You know, if you've got kids, then that increases the chances even more of something popping up in there. So yeah, number one, assess where the issue is coming from. And then number two, if the water's good, you can just do water changes and dilute it out if you're able to. And then otherwise, you can just use detox or a product like that. Those are both suitable options. Yeah, I would be happy to give a no apologies review on most of the products in the market, because there are a lot of things that need to apologize. I will tell you that. I have tested most of the products on the market in some very sophisticated machines, so I can see what a lot of these companies are pushing for us to add to our tanks. And I will tell you, it's not good. It's really not good. There is some very questionable products out there. There's a lot of really good products too, but there is a lot of snake oil. And I'm not going to divulge what is what, but I will support what I support. So, there's ways to get cheaper things. There's ways to grow coral better. There's certainly narratives that are pushed by different corporations, by different coral growers. Then they have an agenda, or they have deals or sponsors with those different companies. So they have a financial incentive to push those things. So yeah, that's that. There's a lot of products out there that I wouldn't use, but there's a lot that I would. And a lot of the ones that I would use, there's some that are big companies, but there's also a lot of small companies. Two I always talk about are Aquab Biomics and Hydrospace. That's the future of the industry, is right there. Those are two biotechnology companies, and two of really the only biotech companies that are in the sector right now. But that is what products are going to look like in the next 10 to 20 years in the hobby. We're going to have probiotics, we're going to have bacteriophages, we're going to have very, very good stuff. I think, there's a lot of room for enzymes and things like that too. There's, like I say, I'm a biotech major. So all I've learned about in college is basically how to apply new cutting-edge technology, gene editing, things like that, that are like new to science right now and are just being applied. So CRISPR is something I've used. So my entire mindset is kind of applying what I've learned in school to the hobby. I have not worked with an ICP. We don't have an ICP machine. I have worked with machines that they don't work in a similar way, but so like how ICP you get back a result, a list of all of your ionic compounds. I have worked with gas chromatography, mass spectrometer. I've worked with liquid chromatography as well. And what those do is they measure the organic components in a system, depending on how you process that sample. So, yeah, it kind of is like ICP in terms of how the results come back, but it's a completely different set of chemicals that you're testing for, and it's also a lot different in terms of testing. It's some pretty monotonous and tedious stuff to set up the samples for sure. And there's a lot that can go wrong. There's an old school wives' tale about keeping pinning in your tank to least beneficial elements. I used to work at a Petco, and I heard some very interesting old school techniques that people came and told me. I'm trying to remember one of them. I can't remember. There was some freshwater guy that had this just insane thing I had never heard of, but I looked into it and it made complete sense looking at the chemistry of it. It wasn't toothpaste. It was something really wacky though. But yeah. Can you mix calc and sodium? Oh, can you add calc and sodium hydroxide at the same time? Yes, but I would keep them in separate containers. Also, if you're mixing sodium hydroxide, it is a very, very hot reaction when you make it soluble with water. So if you're using a plastic container, it can melt very easily. So a good way to do this is to have a bowl of ice and mix it only a little bit at a time in there, and the ice keeps it cool. The ice is going to melt a lot. Keep adding ice. So yeah. Any old school filtration technique I love. Cryptic sumps, I've got one. I think I'm going to do a remote deep sand bed too. I think fuges are cool. Fuges aren't really old school. I mean, they're older and they've been incorporated still, but yeah. But yeah, any last questions, anyone? I've been here for an hour. I don't want to run up everyone's time. I could talk all night, but, you know, it's whatever everyone wants to do. If I get like 10 questions, I'll answer them. So if there's any last questions, I'll answer them. If not, I'm going to go probably frag some coral. Yep, wait for more. If you want to see a product review from me, comment below. I'd like to go and do a product review. Okay, no questions? Well, thanks for tuning in today, Reef Builders. If you didn't catch this live and you're watching this later, it's going to be uploaded. Hopefully we'll have these on YouTube soon. But be sure to drop your questions below, and I'll address them next Thursday at the beginning of the post. Otherwise, I'll see you then. Make sure to check out all the new articles this week from Reef Builders, and make sure to read my article about omics technology. Should have some new articles up probably this week as well, and then a couple new ones next week. So I'll see you guys then. If you've got questions now that I'm not answering because I'm going to go cut my coral, or if you have some for me to answer next time, comment them here. See you guys, and happy reefing.